The evening started off like any other celebrity interview on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Bright lights, roaring applause, and a warm welcome set the stage for what everyone thought would be a routine guest appearance by beloved actor Danny DeVito. Known for his sharp wit and decades of experience in the industry, Danny stepped onto the stage with his signature charisma. But within minutes, the energy in the room began to change. Kimmel, usually masterful at balancing comedy with curiosity, made a comment that seemed to strike a nerve. He joked about an incident involving DeVito's recent comments on studio executives, laughing as if expecting Danny to play along. Instead, DeVito leaned in and replied with a serious tone, "That's not funny, Jimmy." The audience gave a nervous chuckle, unsure if this was part of the act. But the look in Danny's eyes was not one of humor, it was fire. He was not there to joke about the injustices of the industry. What unfolded next was one of the most unexpected and intense confrontations ever seen on a late-night talk show. As Kimmel tried to steer the interview back to neutral territory, DeVito refused to let the moment pass. He began to speak directly and passionately about how Hollywood, despite its glittering Section 8, often chews up talent and exploits creativity. "We're not clowns for your ratings," he said firmly, glancing not just at Jimmy but at the cameras and, by extension, the entire system watching him. Jimmy, visibly uncomfortable, attempted to cut in with a laugh, but Danny wasn't letting go. He accused the industry of silencing voices that speak out and criticized late-night shows for perpetuating a false sense of truth under the guise of humor. The audience, previously lively, now sat in stunned silence. Producers behind the scenes could be seen nervously moving, whispering into headsets, unsure of whether to cut to commercial or allow the segment to play out. The atmosphere had shifted from casual entertainment to something much more real and raw, and Danny DeVito was commanding every second of it. Jimmy, realizing he was losing control of the conversation, stood up and approached Danny in a rare move, perhaps to diffuse the situation with a personal touch. "Danny, let's talk backstage," he said with a smile that barely masked his discomfort. But DeVito waved him off. "Why backstage? Why not here where the truth might actually get heard?" He shot back. There was no going back now. The cameras were rolling, the world was watching, and Danny was unfiltered. He detailed moments from his career when he felt sidelined for speaking his mind, and how the industry rewarded silence and punished honesty. "This is the machine," he said, pointing around the studio, "and too many people are afraid to call it out." The audience didn't know how to react. Some clapped in solidarity, others stayed frozen. Kimmel looked toward the control booth, clearly looking for guidance. But Danny, undeterred, kept talking. His voice grew steadier, more emotional, as he spoke about younger artists afraid to speak their truth, the pressures of fame, and the cost of staying true to oneself. At this point, the producers had no choice but to cut to an unscheduled commercial break. The live feed was replaced with promotional content, but those inside the studio witnessed what couldn't be aired. A group of security personnel approached the stage, not aggressively, but with caution. Danny turned to them and calmly said, "I'm not resisting. I've said what I needed to say." Before they could even guide him off stage, he stood up and began walking toward the exit on his own. The audience remained silent, processing what they had just seen. Kimmel, now alone on stage, looked visibly shaken. When the broadcast resumed, Jimmy addressed the audience with a vague explanation. "Sometimes guests have strong opinions, and sometimes things don't go as planned," he said with an awkward chuckle. But viewers knew this was no ordinary mishap. Clips of the confrontation began circulating online immediately, spreading like wildfire. Danny DeVito, a household name known for comedy, had just turned late-night TV into a platform for a very real and unfiltered message. Social media reacted instantly. Within minutes, DeVito Unfiltered and Kimmel Clash were trending across all platforms. Fans of Danny praised his bravery, hailing him as a rare voice unafraid to speak out. Others criticized him for disrupting the show, calling his actions inappropriate for a comedy platform. News outlets scrambled to publish their takes, with some siding with Jimmy for maintaining professionalism and others applauding DeVito's stand. Public opinion was divided, but the interest was massive. Talk shows, podcasts, and YouTube commentators picked up the story, dissecting every moment of the confrontation. DeVito's publicist released a short statement. Danny has always stood for honesty. Last night was no different. Meanwhile, Kimmel's team avoided specifics, instead issuing a neutral message emphasizing the value of all perspectives and the unpredictability of live television. But the public wanted more. What led to this? Why was Danny so upset? And most importantly, what did this say about the current state of the entertainment industry? The confrontation sparked broader conversations beyond just the incident. Commentators pointed out that late-night shows had become formulaic and overly safe, rarely engaging in real or controversial dialogue. DeVito's outburst, they argued, was less of a meltdown and more of a wake-up call. Some industry insiders began sharing their own experiences anonymously, validating many of the issues Danny touched on: how corporate control influenced content, how dissent was discouraged, and how sanitized public images were prioritized over genuine expression. A few celebrities even took to social media to voice their support for DeVito, calling for a more open and authentic entertainment culture. Danny himself remained mostly quiet in the days that followed, choosing not to do follow-up interviews but instead posting occasional quotes about truth, courage, and the role of art in society. Jimmy, on the other hand, continued with his show, noticeably avoiding jokes about the incident. It was clear that the event had made a lasting impression not just on the viewers, but on the late-night host himself. Eventually, Danny agreed to a sit-down interview on a more serious platform, where he calmly explained his side of the story. It wasn't about Jimmy personally, he said. It was about the system. I just reached a point where I couldn't pretend anymore. The interviewer asked if he regretted his actions. Danny paused and replied, I regret the shock it caused, but not the message. That interview went viral as well, with many praising his poise and clarity. He emphasized that artists have a responsibility not only to entertain but to speak up when they see something wrong. Meanwhile, public sentiment began to tilt in his favor. Viewers started asking for more genuine conversations on TV, more moments that weren't so tightly controlled. Jimmy, to his credit, later acknowledged the moment again on his show, saying, Danny and I might have had a rough night, but I respect his passion. That's something you can't script. The confrontation, while controversial, had sparked something a shift in how audiences viewed their celebrities and the platforms they appeared on. In the months that followed, talk shows subtly changed. Producers allowed more unscripted moments, hosts took bolder stances on real issues, and guests were given more freedom to express themselves. It wasn't a revolution, but it was a start, and much of that shift could be traced back to the night Danny DeVito refused to play along. Some called him reckless, others called him brave. Either way, he had broken the mold. Danny's career didn't suffer. In fact, he found a new audience that appreciated his authenticity. Independent creators invited him on their shows, eager to dive deeper into the thoughts behind his viral moment. He spoke about art, truth, and the price of honesty in a commercial world. Fans sent messages of support, thanking him for reminding them that even in entertainment, truth still matters. Jimmy's show regained its usual rhythm, but that night remained one of its most watched and discussed episodes ever. It served as proof that even in a world driven by ratings and rehearsals, there's still room for something real. As the dust settled, the incident became a symbol of larger conversations in Hollywood. It reminded both creators and consumers of the fine line between performance and reality, and how sometimes that line needs to be crossed. Danny DeVito, once again, proved that he's more than just a comedic actor. He's a voice with substance, one that demands to be heard. The moment he stood up to the expectations of late-night television, he created space for others to follow. His confrontation wasn't just about calling out hypocrisy, it was about reclaiming the power of the platform. Today, that clip is still shared across the internet, not as a scandal, but as a lesson. A reminder that authenticity, even when uncomfortable, can resonate louder than any scripted joke. And while Jimmy Kimmel may have been caught off guard, even he acknowledged that sometimes, the most unforgettable moments are the ones you don't plan. In a world full of carefully crafted images, Danny's fiery confrontation stands as a rare, raw, and refreshing moment of truth.